Yeah, facts. Wait till you facts. All the facts.
No.
One thing that's fun about my section is that it's not usually it's like, let's talk about facts. That
Yeah.
is not facts today. It's just I had a lot more opinions about this than I thought I did. And also just in general, I feel like sometimes I get like too much into like, I must have sources for everything. And then like, you lose like your own thoughts in
Voice,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, today instead, it's gonna be Kat's opinions instead
I
of
love
Kat's
it. I'm
facts.
here for it.
So everyone, you're welcome. I don't know if you'll actually feel that way at the end, but I think you will. To be transparent, I've never read this book for this film. I don't read a lot unless it's like an article online, but it's okay. And my interpretation is entirely based on the film and not the book. Also, I was raised American, as Gabe was saying at the beginning. Like our interpretation of this British story is from like our personal perspective, and it's very possible other people had an entirely different experience with this
Yeah.
film as well as the book. Um, and I love the film. Like honestly, like, it's maybe one of my top horror films now. And it did make me want to read the book because I'm just like curious. I want to know. I want to have all the information in terms of like what the different impacts are and messages from each version of the story. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give some context as to why it impacted me how it did. So I absolutely loved this film. I think it did a fantastic job using the zombie apocalypse as like a staging ground for complex storytelling. There's so much that was done with this film that could have easily followed, and I think maybe we expected it to these more tired plot lines, and instead
Mhm.
did like such unique things that we hoped for. But honestly, like the amount of times we're
We're
disappointed
jaded.
with like, we don't expect it anymore. We're like, I mean, maybe it'll do it. Is it gonna do it? We don't know. And this film did it. Like, it
I've been hurt before.
yes, no, it's literally like as a way to make sure we just don't hate everything all the time. I think we like guard ourselves going into things. So like, I did not expect the ending of this film. I was like, they're not gonna like. We want them to, but are they? So honestly, like there was also so much character development that was delivered through just such simple scripted lines instead of like drawn out action sequences. That part at the end with the soldier and him mentioning, like, it was literally a sentence. And he was like, my wife was pregnant when the zombies time started. And I was like, and I hope that if my baby is out there, you find them or something. Like that was like so
Yeah. You're
powerful.
like, feel
I was
about him.
yeah, I was like, "Oh my god, I hated him, like, this entire time, and now I just, like, kinda get it."
Yeah, but it's like any of those kids could have been yours then,
Yeah, like,
and
you've been,
you
like,
just look so
murdering and
rude as
tying to
hell.
chairs and stuff, but,
Mhm.
like yes. So, it's also like, dude,
Cute.
weird hill to die on. Why was this what you chose to do with
Oh,
your
okay, dude.
time?
Okay,
That
Gramps.
could have been your kid. You just said that, so, like, why are you like, "Let's be
This is
really
awkward.
horrible to all these kids."
Yeah.
But I don't know. But it just, like, added so much character development in, like, a really subtle and thoughtful way that,
Yeah.
like, wasn't like, "We need a 4-hour movie to tell this story." It was like, "Hey, here's a sentence that's gonna provide, like, extreme amounts of character development very quickly." So, the film somehow managed to be, like, subtle and direct at the same time all the way through, and I just really appreciated it. So, the ending was my favorite part because honestly, like for the ghouls, I feel like this is something we say a lot. It's the message of it really resonated with me, in that humanity has been here, destroying each other and the planet for centuries, waiting, like waiting and expecting chance after chance to keep going, to keep trying.
Mhm.
Maybe our chances are exhausted. Like that's what the film basically said. Like we have been squandering the gifts. The girl with all the she has all the gifts. We have been
We can
taking the
grow
gifts,
out of them.
taking and taking and taking, and maybe the planet is done dealing with our crap, essentially. Maybe we squandered the gifts and we should stop expecting more. Um, and I mean, is what it is. But
Yeah.
so, like, yeah, essentially, like when the end of this movie came, I was thrilled by like so many pieces of it, but specifically that they didn't make Melanie their sacrifice and instead
Mhm.
like gave her autonomy, which is something like ironically you don't always see in zombie films, and especially with like monstrous femme stories. Like it's usually them navigating these spaces and being like, dang, it would be really cool if like I had any power.
Yeah.
And I feel like in these like in when you think that a character should be sacrificing something, you usually take their autonomy. Like that's something that we saw in The Last of Us, but I'll get into that like as we go. But essentially, I love that they like allowed Melanie to have their autonomy in this very specific situation. And honestly, she owed them nothing. Like, and it
Yeah.
was just so refreshing that when Melanie delivered the line, like, why should we have to die for you to live? To which I say, heck yes. The humans, like the entire film did nothing but showcase how awful they were, like their cruelty, their hatred, their capacity for viewing others as less.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing to inspire any sense of compassion or admiration. It wasn't like, hey, like we're good. You should want to sacrifice
We're
yourself for us. There's
worthy.
literally one human that kind of did that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like outside of occasionally treating Melanie with like diet kindness, which is like the bare
Yeah.
minimum of human experience.
That's
Like that's
so
like the
real.
that's the bare minimum expectation is to just treat someone like they're also a person. Um, there was no reason, in my opinion, for Melanie to even hesitate in making her choice. And I appreciated the fact she didn't.
Yeah.
Um, like just because her teacher was the one human who had the capacity to see her as a living thing, like as a
Yeah.
living being, that didn't erase all the other humans being the literal worst the entire film.
Yeah. She had to work so hard just to get them to treat her like a human.
Yeah, and it's like also it kind of ties back into like that other thing, like where it's like our judgment of humanity is purely based on the like what humanity, like the fact that you have to be human to matter, like that's
Mhm.
also like a whole problem. So
Yeah.
it's a
You have to
whole
perform
thing.
this specific version of human.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, people are allowed to be mad when you treat them like crap their entire lives. Like, who are you to say that they can't be mad? So yeah, at the end of the day, um, the uninfected humans place their value higher than Melanie and all the other Hungries. So they're asking something of her that's honestly absurd. Like there are instances where the humans even kind of mention this, where they're like, who we were before making it to that base. We did horrible things.
Yeah.
We were the monsters. Like they say something along those lines. And it's like,
And you
yeah,
feel real bad about it now.
yeah. And it's like clearly you recognize the wrongs you've done, but you're running from your accountability just as much as you're running from the Hungries. Like,
Mm. Snaps.
so their like occasional kindness to Melanie is honestly at like after that just manipulative. Just
Mm.
like all of their other interactions with her. They treat her like a monster the entire film with the goal of making Melanie view herself that way. They treat her as less the entire film with the goal of Melanie viewing herself that way so that she'll do what they want. So she will sacrifice herself because she'll think they've literally never been kind to her. So their goal is for her to view herself as less and therefore worthy of sacrificing herself for them.
Yeah.
Like it's all very manipulative and like she should not. She is not what they think of her and does not owe them any kindness, honestly. Uh, so like as you were saying, it's like that's the same, no mercy would have been given by them.
Mhm.
So like why is it expected of her to give that mercy back? So ultimately, Melanie owed them nothing. So I thought it was really great that the film didn't make her a sacrifice because if they did, honestly, it might have changed my entire perspective on the film. I don't know because I know the book does a whole different time, and it could be that like because of like how I was cast, like I just felt more for the character because of that. I don't know,
Yeah.
but what I have heard about the book is that it is really interesting, and honestly, has very vastly different impact. So I'm curious, and hopefully one day I'll read the book.
Yeah. I will
Um,
also say I think like I still would have felt pretty strongly
yeah,
about Melanie even if she was the white girl.
yeah, I
Like
think
at
so
the end, like
too.
I think I still would have liked like I still would have been like, yeah, she wins. Like so it's not as impactful, but I still would have wanted her to win.
Yeah, because it's like the whole idea is that they've been like tortured and treated like monsters their entire life. And there's just something like by these people, like, and there's just something that doesn't sit right with me about that.
Yeah.
Like maybe we don't do that, guys. So one thing that was interesting about this film is that it had some similarities to the Last of Us games, in more than one way. In that, like, they used the cordyceps fungus, as well as like kind of like the theme that's explored. But I appreciated what this film did with the storyline. So similar to the Last of Us games, Ellie, like Melanie, is expected to sacrifice herself for a vaccine. One big difference is that Ellie like wants to.
Mm,
And there's also this like story of having their autonomy stripped
mhm,
from them that I didn't appreciate about Ellie's story. Like, I feel like it would have been fine if Ellie was like, "Hey, I don't want to be a vaccine person,"
mhm.
but like Joel does that for her, and that's messed up. But I appreciated that this film didn't do that to Melanie. Like, it was Melanie's choice, and when she said no, like that's just what it had to be,
Yep.
essentially. Um, and something else that I appreciate about the film is that like it made Melanie very zombie forward. Like, instead of harping on her
Her
humanity and
zombie.
like trying to make the viewer wrap their head around why Melanie deserved to live by like removing her zombie traits, Melanie like leaned into the power that came with her abilities. And I thought that was like really powerful as a statement too. Like,
Mhm.
she didn't have to change herself or sacrifice her identity to like make the uninfected humans feel better. Like, sure, she did like try to like make them feel more comfortable, but at the end of the day, she made her choice and they're just going to have to live with that.
Mhm.
She remained Melanie and a Hungry simultaneously without compromising or giving into like the expectation that she should sacrifice herself. And the sacrifice is like the idea that someone should sacrifice themselves is something that is explored a lot in zombie scenarios, especially with like this idea that like there could be a cure. But it's
Mhm.
also something that like humanity as a whole has reckoned with for a long time, especially like Eurocentric audiences. So this idea of the necessity of this sacrifice and forgiveness for like the atrocities that have been pushed as a narrative throughout history, as well as like a lot to unpack. There's this idea that the sacrifice of one should be made for the whole, that the
Mhm.
greater good. uh, there's like a long history of attempting to validate atrocities with this view of like necessary evil, when ultimately that is just an attempt to excuse oneself from accountability by claiming it was necessary.
Chidi is
So
having a panic attack.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chidi is losing it.
Yeah, he's like, "What do we do? Is it the
The
train?"
train.
Yeah, so it's just like the like it's a very Eurocentric idea, I think, like this theme of like the necessary sacrifice. And it's seen a lot in the story of like Jesus Christ,
Mm,
that he
yeah.
sacrificed himself for humanity to be get forgiven, that he loved people despite their sins, flaws, and otherwise, like forgave them. And that like he loved and forgave them despite the fact that people literally murdered him in cold blood and
Yep.
in an extremely brutal fashion.
On
Um,
display
yeah. And I
and
think there's a
cheered.
lot to unpack there as well. But I think ultimately, like Eurocentric audiences tend to expect forgiveness and sacrifice when approaching topics like this, and are often spoon fed that narrative. So they expect Melody to sacrifice herself for Miss Justino and humanity as a whole. And when that doesn't happen, it's surprising. So, like, all that is to say is I appreciated the change of pace, and I think it like really added to the story. I was like, yes.
100%.
Um, but it's also interesting when applying this to like the monsters fem, and I think it takes on like a different meaning, like the use of zombies, and how like the zombie monsters fem is kind of different, especially in the way the story took it. So what we see in a lot of monsters fem narratives and in creative and historical storytelling is the idea that the monster doesn't always win. The monster either lives below the surface, outside humanity, or like loses entirely. That like good prevails against the monster, or that the monster like learns to live either with humanity and that humanity as a whole comes out the other side mostly unchanged, or they like just go away. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they
They're
only exist
ostracized.
at night, or if they're the mermaid, they go out into the ocean and just don't
They
bother
become
people
sweet
no
foam.
more. So like essentially like the monster changes that like loses their autonomy and power by like going off into the sidelines and like kind of just letting humanity do what it's going to do. And while these narratives can garner like sympathy for the monster, there's also this theme that the human matters more, I think, because they
Mhm.
still get the limelight, you know, and that the monster must like adjust to this human centered planet. I appreciated this film didn't do that. And instead, humanity had its turn. And now it's
Mhm.
zombie human hybrid time, to be authentically themselves out in the light, and all the humans go away. Um, And I think something that's interesting that we see with witches, succubi, cameos, werewolves, and humans, um, is that the humans usually have the numbers in these narratives, that there are fewer monsters than humans, so that
Hmm.
the advantage is in the humans' court, essentially. But zombies kind of present the opposite, where they're often end up outnumbering the human. So where one is to exist in the peripheral, the zombie demands the limelight. And I thought that was like a really interesting difference in like the monstrous storyline.
Hmm.
And the positioning of zombies as mindless is also very different from the narrative of this story. There being a transitional group of zombies that are kind of mindless that set the stage for this emerging generation of intelligent, symbiotic zombie human hybrids. As we talked about in many previous schools episodes, there's so much that zombies can represent when taking an analytical look at society, be it consumerism, cannibalism, loss of autonomy, among other things. And as we learned in the Last of Us episode, something that's really interesting is that the fungus for the cordyceps fungus that we see in this film is actually a real fungal infection that impacts ants and spiders. So if you're curious about that and the scientific accuracy of the fungal zombie experience, definitely check that episode out. There's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack there. And I thought like the use of the virus in this way, it was similar to Last of Us in that like you would probably need gas masks to survive because you can't just breathe the air,
Hmm.
and that it is airborne, but like it mimics very much like the actual cordyceps fungus and how it would interact with the brain, and also like symbiosis, I think is what it's called, and they mention it in the film actually, like when the doctor and Melanie are talking, basically about like a fungus interacting with a host in like a symbiotic relationship, like they are working together, they aren't overtly hurting each other. So that's like a real thing too. Like there are animal species that do that. There's funguses that do that, that kind of like act in tandem and like in this kind of like partnership. So there are elements to this film, as terrifying as that is, that like could maybe happen. I don't know if we're at a fungal infection spread that like we have these pods and we need to be scared because the zombies are coming.
Hmm.
Um, but there are fungi that outside of the cordyceps fungus that like do act as a mind control type thing. And I put some sources for that in my script notes, but I did not get to read all of them. But there are real funguses that like do zombify different animals.
Hmm.
And that's something that could happen in the world. Will it impact humans? Who knows? I don't think we have that information yet.
Yeah, we don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Zombies might be inevitable. Um,
Yeah.
but yes, I agree
We've
with all the
written
things
enough
that you
about
said.
it, you know? We've written enough about it that like
Yeah.
let them come.
Yeah. We all feel like we would know what to do, and then I feel like we wouldn't because it would be like
Yeah.
a very different kind, and we'd be like, "That none of Romero did not prepare me for this. It has nothing to do with the head. Like maybe it's controlling some other nervous system part or something." Um,
Yeah,
who
there's a lot
knows?
of things that could happen. And I think like the brain control element, like zombies can a lot of the times represent this like fear of loss of autonomy. And I think that wasn't in like you have that whole generation that was. So that was interesting piece
But
of this
even
film.
still, like there was little aspects where they were holding on to things, like they were
Yeah.
performing, like the one who like was pushing the stroller. And the
Yeah.
doctor was like, "I've never seen a zombie or hungry with maternal instincts before." And so, like, after a while being there, like parts of you kind of come back, and that's been explored in zombie films too, where they are performing like actions, like they end up at the mall because they're
Yeah, yeah,
performing
yeah. They're like, I
consumerism.
used to go
Yeah,
to
like
spend
go to
money.
work or whatever. Like your brain's just like do the actions, which I think is interesting. I did want to highlight one other book though that is really, I mean, has similar themes, especially when we
Uh-huh.
have this black girl as a protagonist, and that is the book series Lilith's Brood by Octavia Butler, who's an
Ooh.
amazing like Afro sci-fi creator, sci-fi writer, like honestly one
Yeah.
of the most amazing, impactful ones. And Lilith's Brood, uh, like Dawn, kind of has like a similar theme. That's the first one, where it is like this woman who wakes up and like humans are pretty much gone, and she's tasked
Yeah.
with like bringing about the next generation that will be hybrids, or ideally would be hybrids between this like alien race and her. So
Okay.
definitely check it out. I'm like, it's on my list. Like, I love Octavia Butler, and I've been meaning to read more. And so I'm like, that's gonna be the next trilogy I fight through. So especially because sci-fi is like something we're really into right now. So might be interesting. So definitely
Yeah.
check that out. So that's Lilith's Brood series, the trilogy. I think
We're
it's a
giving you a lot
trilogy.
of books to
Girl with
get
All the
through.
Gifts,
Yeah.
and then Wilder Girls. I actually can't remember the name of the author. Rory Power. It's
Yeah.
pretty sweet. It's like short. Working through it, and again, it's about girls who get powers. Well, not powers. They're different. They're affected by nature, Zika horror, and something happens, and now they're all a little weird. They're all doing stuff, but it's not like X-Men or something. It's actually like
Yeah.
really scary and sad, and also super queer. So, highly recommend just for that, because you get that whole extra element of it being a really cool thing that ghouls would love.
Yeah.
Talk about representation. So, uh, yeah, I think that was a phenomenal film on so many levels. There's
Yeah.
nothing about it that I was disappointed in or like upset about. Like I said, like if anything, it just confirmed feelings that I was going to have at the end. Like I never felt like that didn't need to be there, and that's
Yeah.
so
No, that's
nice.
true.
It's so nice to have a film that you're like 10 out of 10. It's good, like coming from like Jacob's Wife, where we were like, this is like in the top 5 worst horror films we've seen that like angered us, to
Yeah.
having like now we have one of our top 5 favorites in this
Yeah, it was
series.
refreshing, honestly. And I mean, like, I feel like there's even more we could say about it in terms of like even just like unpacking the scene like at the like the beginning sequence
Hmm.
and like connecting that back to like how many times in history have people collectively dehumanized a group
Yeah.
for the benefit of whatever they decided was more important.
Yeah. And also like, the education of children, like
Yeah.
specifically with like,
Not treating them like they're people either.
yeah, there's so much to be said. And it's so refreshing. Very unique. Like it's just not something I ever thought it would be. And I'm so happy that we are covering it on this series. And we're almost done with this series. We have 2 more episodes after this. One is like a surprise that we didn't know we were gonna do, but I'm very excited to do
One is
it.
like, can we do it?
It's
Yes,
like, of
we
course,
make the rules.
I was
So
like telling someone about this series, and I like was mentioning like ginger snaps or something, or one of my Monstrous scripts or something, and they're like,
yeah.
"Hey, that's kind of like," and then they explained like why. I was like, "Oh, okay, Kat, we got to do it.
Yeah,
Like, there's no
100%.
reason
And
why
it's a
not."
secret right now. We're not telling you. It's a
Yeah,
secret.
yeah, you'll know.
You'll know later.
Um, but if you enjoyed this, I hope you do check out the rest of our Monstrous Femme series. You can check out our eco horror series if you want to be afraid of the environment in a different way.
Yeah.
There's so many levels. You'll find this episode in many of our playlists on YouTube. Um, and like and subscribe. Make sure you drop us
Please.
a comment. Let us know if there are books or films that you want to recommend to us. You can do so at theghouls@gmail.com, or just follow us on social media and send us messages or comments, especially if there's like eco horror or there's horror novels, trilogies, things like that have similar messaging that you think would be really beneficial. I'm looking to read it. I'm ready to
Yeah.
do that.
We're
So
like hungry for interaction.
we're hungry. We're
We
hungry.
miss people telling us stuff. We miss
Sorry that you all
stuff.
have to die for us,
Yeah.
but you already had your chance.
Yeah,
Look
right?
what you
That's
did with
like
it.
okay, so it's like a whole other thing. I'm just gonna real quick,
Yeah.
it's my little soapbox. This is real quick.
Okay, okay.
So that's something like I think is really interesting. So I see a lot of people who, in general, like want to save the planet, and I get
Hmm.
it. Like 100%, we should need to. Like
Yeah.
1000%, we need to. But what I usually will write, like in my fear, is like I like hope the planet survives us, and it's like yes, I want the us to survive too. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Because I want to have kids and I want them to have a place to be.
Hmm.
But also it's like I want the planet to survive us.
And it will. It totally will. It's
Yeah.
not going anywhere. It'll just look
It's just
different,
not
and
for us
we can't be
anymore.
here.
It's
Yeah.
not our turn anymore. It's not all over. It's just
It's
it's
not
not
over. It's
ours
just not
anymore.
yours
Yeah.
anymore. Oh my God, Melanie.
I
Like,
really have a blood beard, I just want to
I
say.
can't.
Like it's,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
hope
lot.
people are watching because we look
My mom's
spooky.
gonna hate this episode just because of this, because she doesn't like seeing me look dead.
Yeah, that's it. Don't get married.
They'll eat your kids or
Your
your
kids will
kids.
eat you.
Yeah.
Or
Or everyone else.
and everyone else, and fine.
Yeah.
Get it, kid. Get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go live.
I raised
Go
a
evolve.
fighter.
Here's hoping, honestly,
Raised a fighter.
that the if there's a new version of human, that they figure out how to be here still. And if that's like scary to us now, that's fine.
Change is always scary.
We had our turn. It's fine.
We had a long turn. I think we're done. I think we've
Yeah.
messed this up. I think we've shown that we're done.
It reminds me of
think
that
we need to do it
episode that
anymore.
we had where it's like, this is humanity's done. And
Yeah.
the bleep bloops and
Yeah, it's-
sky, and we put in a new
God's like trying to
VHS tape.
yeah. God's like, time to try a different race, try a different group of beings.
Yeah.
We'll
New
The reset, refresh.
sentient life form. We're gonna do a whole
Yeah.
new one. Control Alt
This
Delete.
was a failed experiment. It goes in the trash.
Yeah.
Delete trash permanently, and then get some new beings. Okay. Well, bye.
It's like Big Bang Big.
Made a Big Bang made us. Big Crunch eat us.
Yeah. So it's just like, oh, that was a mistake.
My bad. Like rewind.
Yeah. We're a VHS tape in the little blip of universe time. That God just takes out and
like,
it's just
oops.
like, well, we'll try again.
I don't know
New
what
one.
I was thinking. Oops.
Yeah, so it's like Futurama where he's just like sitting in his little blippity bloops in the sky.
Yeah.
And, but he has a VHS tape in this scenario.
Okay.
And he's watching humanity and he's like, guys,
let's-
this is awful.
Let's start back at the top.
We are not going to renew this season. Let's start
Of
fresh.
humanity.
There's no season 3 of humanity.
Oh no.
And then it's like, and he takes it out. And he's like, people, and he writes it on there with a Sharpie, and he puts it on the shelf next to other species. That he was just like, that might work. And he pops into it, and he's like, you know what? We're gonna start fresh.
And maybe the blue blurbs will do better than us.
Yes.
Or whatever he
The
comes up
schmeckles.
with. The schmeckles.
Schmeekles.
The schmeemorps.
Yep.
Or the